Hi, I'm Ann. Welcome back to my channel. And today we are going to be reviewing the book The Alice Network by Quinn. So I was hoping to post this video last week, but I have just been so overwhelmed with Easter and my husband's car broke down and our toilet exploded. That was a whole debacle. So I haven't had time to get this video out until today. So here's the thing with World War II novels in general. I find them to be very samey. They tend to be very similar in themes, in setting. They tend to have two storylines, a more modern one and a more historic one. And, you trace both lines. I've read so many countless books that are similar to this. And I just think in the historical fiction genre, World War II books are highly oversaturated. So I tend not to pick them up as a rule, just because I've read a lot of them and to me they feel all the same. However, this one I've heard referred to as being the best World War II historical fiction. And it was up for, I believe, 2017. It was a Goodreads historical fiction nominee, though I will say I don't really trust Goodreads that much, so take that as you will. And I've heard Quinn praised as being one of the queens of historical fiction, being one of the best out there. And so when I discovered this in a little free library, I picked it out just because I was like, you know what? Yes, I don't like this subgenre that much of historical fiction because I think it is so much oversaturated. But I have heard this book praised up and down so many times that I decided to give it a chance. So what is this book about? This book follows two timelines. Charlie Sinclair is this 19-year-old girl living in 1947 who is determined to find her cousin Rose. Rose is French. She was in France during World War II, during the time the Germans occupied France, and she vanished around, I think, 1944. And Charlie is determined to find her. And there's one name that has been associated with Rose's last known whereabouts, and that is Eve Gardner. And the address is in London. So Charlie goes to London, and she is there actually because her parents are forcing her to have an abortion because she got pregnant out of wedlock, and her parents very much want her to get an abortion and so they can go back to America and not have to deal with her having a baby out of wedlock. And so she runs off from them and meets with Eve Gardner, who is the other timeline. Eve Gardner in 1915 was a spy for the British intelligence, and she was stationed, I believe in France, and she was stationed as a undercover waitress at this restaurant that catered to Germans during World War I, and she is supposed to listen to, as much as possible, the plans of the Germans. And her employer thinks she only speaks French, so he doesn't know that she speaks German as well and can understand all these German officers that come into the restaurant. And so you have Charlie's perspective as she meets an older and very traumatized Eve Gardner in her 50s in 1947, and then it also follows Eve when she is, I think, 22 or something like that in 1915. This book very much gets into trauma more than your average World War II novel. Not that those don't get into trauma that much, but this one really shows in graphic detail the horrific things that people have to endure because of war. So you see it from Eve's perspective. You see it from Charlie's perspective because her brother fought in World War II and he ended up committing suicide. When he came back from the war, he was greatly depressed. He tried to live a normal life and he just kept cracking. And so he ended up taking his own life. And you learn that relatively early on in the book, why I don't think that's a spoiler. And so you see all these different characters. You also have the chauffeur of Eve that you learn about his past in war as well. So you have all these characters that are brought together almost because of their trauma, because of their harsh lives. And I think that was well done, but I also think the author went a little bit too far in mitigating morality, almost taking a relativistic stand on morality, in saying that, nothing's good or bad because war forces us to do evil things, and that doesn't make us evil people. But in doing so, I think she went so far as to say those things are not evil under circumstances, when I think, there is a firm line between good and bad. Evil and good. Saying that, you can't say just because someone does something evil that they are then evil. So if someone breaks into your house and you kill them, that doesn't mean you're evil, even though the action of killing that person, I would say, is always evil. You can never say taking another life is a good thing. It's always going to be evil, but that doesn't make you evil. And so I think that was the stance that Kate Quinn didn't quite bring across to the reader. She made it seem as if certain things were a good thing or were good under the circumstances of war. So, for example, one of the characters ends up beating another character horribly. And I'll be vaguely, because that's not like a big spoiler. And that first character that beats that other person horribly, it's fine that they did that. They don't have to deal with any repercussions of that because of their trauma dealing with war. And I think it's okay to say that action is evil, horrible to beat someone up for no reason. But you can also say they have that trauma. And I feel like the book missed that just a little bit in differentiating that evil is evil, no matter in what form it comes, even if you are forced to do evil to survive. It's still evil. It's just you aren't necessarily evil. So some might disagree with me on that, and that's fine. I would love to know what you would think about that type of thing, because I feel like in war, in those types of situations, a lot of evil has to be done to survive, but I also think it doesn't have to be done. You could die. As a Catholic, that would be my moral stance, is sometimes it is better to die than to do a great evil. That's personally my opinion, but you guys may disagree with me, and that's totally fine. Now, several things that I did not enjoy is I don't think every single timeline, every single character has to have romance introduced into it. It's one of my biggest pet peeves of historical fiction is like historical fiction has to include romance. Don't get me wrong, like I enjoy romance, but I think it gets tiring when every single historical book you read, it's like a quota of historical fiction that there needs to be romance. And I think you don't always need that. And I think the way it was handled in this book, I didn't always enjoy, especially Charlie's romance. I was not a fan of her romantic love interest, and like I liked them individually as people. They were interesting characters, but I didn't enjoy what their romance added to the plot. But in many ways, the book is very well written. The pacing goes very well. It was interesting how they tied together the storylines in the end. You didn't usually know where the book was leading, so I wasn't sure which character would live, which one wouldn't. Like, obviously, you knew that Eve was going to survive the wars because she was in 1947 with Charlie. So you knew a certain amount of like who's gonna live, but there was so much mystery around like what was going on with the characters and what was gonna happen. It created a lot of interest, and in many ways this book balanced thriller elements, mystery elements with the idea and themes of war, with the ideas of like romance. And personally, I didn't like the romance, but the other two were really interesting how they delved into. Now it comes down to, is this book worth reading compared to other World War II fiction, historical fiction books? I do think it delves into war and the trauma of war better than your average historical fiction. So if that's what you're looking for in historical fiction or World War II fiction, I think that this book does better than your average one. Saying that, I think there's a lot of like tropes that these World War II books fall into that makes me reluctant to say that this book is better in any way. I think it is better written than some, maybe worse written than others. But I think if you like World War II historical fiction, you will like this book. But if, like me, you're looking for some of the best historical fiction and you don't really want to waste your time with so many similar books, I don't think this one was different enough for me. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars, so I enjoyed it. It's not like, I look down on it as being below my interest because, look, I read all these classics. But I do think that if this is the type of book that you like, if you like World War II historical fiction, you will like this. But for me, it didn't do anything. It wasn't as good. There were certain things that lowered the quality for me enough that I couldn't say, oh, I think this book is better than the other World War II books, World War II historical fiction that I have read. It still fell into tropes of romance. It still fell into tropes of ambiguous morality that you see a lot. It still fell into the tropes of 2 timelines kind of intermingling, very similar to a lot of other historical fiction I read. So this book is good. I wouldn't say it's great. That is my consensus. But I'm curious, have you read this book? Would you disagree with my thoughts? I would love to know your thoughts for this book, as well as just the genre of World War II historical fiction down in the comments. I love hearing all your opinions. And thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a great week. Bye.